to order. Car, are we ready to go? Good. All right, so we'll call to order the meeting of the Green Bay Housing Authority for Thursday, October 20th, 2022. It's a little after 10:30. We've got roll call, so the first item on the agenda would be approval of the agenda. And I will make that motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I will second that.
A motion and a second. Are there any additions or modifications to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the agenda as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Move on to approval of the minutes from the June 23, 2022 meeting of the Green Bay Housing Authority. That document is in your packet. Are there any additions, corrections, or modifications? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I will approve that.
All right, and I will make the second to that. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the minutes from the June 23rd meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, item E on our agenda is a hearing regarding the proposed issuance by the Green Bay Housing Authority of revenue bonds on behalf of University Village Housing Incorporated, a Wisconsin nonprofit corporation.
So Bill,
Cheryl?
I can tell you that we were contacted by UvHi, when the numbers first came in for this well, let me back up. The GBHA approved borrowing or bonding for this project. So this is campus housing. And when the numbers came in, they were high. So I think the project was put on hold for a while, but UvHi Group has retooled and they're coming back. They'd like to increase the bond amount from 25 to 40 million. And then the only change in the project is a decrease in units from, it was 232, will now be 200 units. So Steve, you're still involved with this project, I think?
Yes.
That's pretty much the bottom line for kind of what's happening here, right? As far as changes go?
Yep. Sort of the construction market doing its thing. We've slightly revamped a minor reduction in total quantities of available pillows, but we God almighty still have a project.
Right. So the
Yeah.
only thing that I guess we need to redo is because of those changes, we need to have this public hearing again for comment, which we noticed. And
All right, so I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I will second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to open the public hearing on the University Village Housing Project. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Okay, the public hearing is open. Are there any comments from the public? Do we have any members of the public online? Any comments from the public? One last time, any public comment on the University Village Housing Project? That was an increase in the project cost and a slight decrease in the number of units to be constructed. One last time, any public comment? Hearing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make the motion.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Aaron seconds. Very good. All in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Motion is approved. Public hearing is closed. There's no further action items on this, so we will move forward with the informational items. Item number 1 under section F is update on plan for redevelopment project for scattered sites and Mason Manor redevelopment.
so just brief this for a while. The Housing Authority, when we originally looked at financing plans, we looked at that 60-40 split. In the meanwhile, our developers have been struggling with the increased cost of interest rates and all of these moving parts, along with environmental reviews and tax credit applications. And I think we're at a point now where we've come to some determinations on ways forward and some timelines. So I wanted to bring this back to the board, so you could hear kind of where we are. We have representatives here from Gorman and Company. Ted and Trent are here, I think, and then Caitlin is here as well. Baker Tilly is our consultant. So guys, I don't know, we should open the floor. Oh, and Larissa, sorry, Larissa's here too. Did I miss anybody else? There's a lot of moving parts, so we work with a lot of people. But we need to motion to open the floor, and then we can let you guys kind of give us the update on where we are in the project.
Make a
I will
motion.
make
Make
that
that
motion.
motion,
All
or
right,
I'll
we have a
second
motion.
Steve, I'll second Steve.
Steve's got the motion. Sandy's got the second. All in favor of opening the floor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The floor is open. All right, folks, go ahead.
Okay, great. Hey, Ted Matcom, I'm the Wisconsin market president for Gorman and Company. Thanks so much for giving us some time today. Give you a little update of what's going on. Of course, you've heard it in the last item. You know, construction is just everyone's hero these days in terms of rising interest rates and rising inflation also. So we've been struggling with that on this project, and we think we have a path, and it's not a path that we probably would have or envisioned when we started this project, but I think we've kind of taken you through most of what we were thinking in our last meeting, but kind of wanted to give you the path that we've chosen, I guess, and talked about, and wanted you guys to make sure you were comfortable with it. There's things. When we started this deal, we had to have, per HUD regulations, what's called a capital needs assessment. Sometimes it's called a physical needs assessment, CNA, PNA, whatever you want to call it. It's the same kind of acronym. And that targets the capital needs that Mason Manor needed to kind of be up to snuff. HUD takes that CNA as their Bible, and you got to comply with that. Like if you say you're not going to do something in the CNA, you got to ask kind of for a waiver, and they're like, why would you take a waiver? Why don't you just do it? So you need the money to do that. So in order to comply with the CNA, and then there were a couple things that were, to be honest with you, we all met with Cheryl and Jamie and the staff last week, and there were some wish list items, what we called wish list items, which weren't in the CNA, which we all kind of determined are the really kind of necessity items that we're going to put in the budget, like they are in the CNA, but they're just quality of life issues, which I won't go through them, but all of the wish list items and the CNA items were kind of packaging into a budget. And we did that, and the way we've recently priced it, the way we're going to source that budget is, and there's a kind of a 3-prong approach, maybe a 4-prong approach, and I'll have Caitlin kind of describe to you a little bit some of the avenues we looked at. But on a macro level, we're making Mason Manor a historic landmark building in Green Bay. It's actually got some amazing history. The architecture of Mason Manor, I don't know if it's not so much, right? But the history of Mason Manor and when it was created and why it was created was fantastic. We documented that. SHPO, which is the State Housing Preservation Office, they've signed off on that being historic, which means we can get historic tax credits, federal historic tax credits and state historic tax credits on Mason Manor, which is fantastic. I mean, that gives us so much free equity without doing really anything special. The building's pretty much staying the way it is anyway. So that's just a windfall to us for our budget. Not a windfall, but it allows us to give sourcing to meet our budget of what we need to do. So that's a great deal. The second thing was, you guys, as you know, have 48 scattered sites, which were taken through a Section 18 dispo process, which kind of removed them from the public housing, if you recall. If you have any questions on that, let us know. But that was a Section 18 that was granted to you. That has owned by the housing authority, but taken out of public housing. We are actually taking those 48 scattered sites and putting it into the Mason Manor project as one project. And it's not like the scattered sites need that much work, but by putting them into our Mason Manor project, we get all of that fantastic income of the rent, but we don't have to do that much work to each scattered site. We're doing about, I think the minimum is $20,000 that we have to do for, which is like, repair a roof or some siding and, your air conditioner and your furnace. So the minimal work, but the great boost in income also is a great source for the project, so that we can source this growing budget because of inflation that we're faced with in terms of doing the improvements that are necessary on Mason Manor for the community needs assessment. So all of that is, so we've got a historic, we got the scattered sites, and then we kind of took a step. Amy and Cheryl were like, are we sure that we're going down the right road with HUD? Like, are we doing, and I'll have Caitlin kind of explain to you what the four kind of three or four, I think it was the three avenues that we talked about. But what we were looking at and what we've decided upon. And the good news is we decided upon exactly what we proposed before. But what was nice about this is we went through all of the options that you would have that HUD provides refinancing public housing, and we ended up with what we agreed on earlier, which is a little circular, I guess, but it gives you comfort that we're doing the right thing. And I'm just going to have Caitlin, she's the expert in this. And the great thing about this partnership, and I just want to go through this real quick, is, Baker Tilly is the compliance expert, HUD procedure expert, and they are hired by the housing authority to do what's best for the housing authority. And then we are the developer that executes on that plan. So you kind of have a two-tier quality control in a sense. And Caitlin and Jamie and Cheryl were like, let's explore these options to make sure that we're on the right path. And then we'll have Gorman execute. So I'm going to let Caitlin kind of take you through the analysis she did and what we came up with. Is that okay, Caitlin?
That sounds great. Can everyone see the screen? Does it look okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So as Ted was mentioning, probably 3-ish months ago, we, talked with Jamie and Cheryl and wanted to make sure that we were on the correct HUD path. And so really kind of 4 paths kind of materialized. So this option 2 is the path that we've always kind of been running on, where we're doing a RAD conversion that splits RAD with Section 18 units. I know we've talked before about those Section 18 units can charge higher rents. So that's what we were always doing. But then we introduced a couple other options. One is to just do a complete, just straight RAD conversion. But Brown County, things will kind of just still operate the same. But because we're only charging RAD rents, it's significantly lower income. So that means that we can't do the level of rehab that's required in the CNA, and we can't do our wish list items. If we did, we'd have a significant gap to the number. So you can see here that if we were going to do what's in the CNA plus our wish list, we have to source an extra almost $3 million. And again, that's because our rents are being cut because the RAD rents are lower.
And the reason, just to go over that, the RAD rents are lower because it comes from a formula that HUD has produced of what you can get for that RAD unit, okay, versus the Section 18 has kind of a fair market value aspect of that rent. So you get more rent on the Section 18 versus the RAD. That's kind of the difference. So Section 18 are preferable. You get more income on that. Okay, so this is only the RAD one here.
Yes. And then this other option, which is a little bit similar, but it's called mixed finance. It actually lets you stay public housing. the rent situation is very similar, where it's kind of a net neutral. It's based on your existing capital and operating funds. Again, we couldn't, do the needed amount of rehab required in our capital needs assessment or our wish list. You can see that in this case, it's almost a $5 million gap. So financially, these other two options really don't work to achieve the goals of the housing authority.
And just to further clarify, like when you look at the, can you go back there real quick?
Yep, sorry, Ted.
So when it says amount of rehab per unit at Mason Manor, that's how much the deal can support. You can only do 89,000 per unit in that financial model. In the mixed finance, you see, you can only do 78,000. That's where the gap comes from. The gap comes from what you have to spend to do the CNA items. Okay, that's where the gap comes from. So you have the RAD, you got, with a wish list, which we think should be incorporated for quality of life purposes for the residents. You have a $2.7 million gap. Over here, you have a $4.7 million gap. So it's just very drastic in terms of what the gap is on those two models.
Excellent point. So, and comparatively, right, the path that we've been running on, there isn't a financial gap because you could accomplish all of the items in the CNA and all of your wish list items. I will show this one option, this additional option, I should say, that we also set aside. As you can see, you can still do a very significant amount of rehab, all of the CNA wish list items, plus some additional items. But under this option of doing the 80-20 blend, and I know we've talked about it before, you would lose your ability to build new units. So you lose all of your Faircloth authority. And my understanding in discussions with you guys previously is that something that's very important to you is bringing more housing into the city of Green Bay. Through this gyration over the last 2-3 months of like confirming that the existing path that we're on is a good one and it accomplishes everything that you need to do at your property.
Yeah, so in other words, it meets the CNA option 2, 60/40. The $107,000 per unit at Mason Manor meets the CNA budget, provides the threshold that we have to do for scattered sites, and then there is no gap, but it also retains your Faircloth. So that's kind of like the package that we were always running with. We just confirmed that still works. And that's what I think we all want to do because it obtains all the goals.
That option 2 gives us the ability to maintain 91, I think, Faircloth units. So those are public housing units we kind of have in our pocket that at a future point we can build and will go into the public housing system.
Right.
Kind of like we have now, which is great to have because we need more units.
Well, and I think it's important that everybody understands that the reason there's a RAD program is because HUD has really kind of trying to take public housing units off the table because they want you to be both responsible in your operating costs and responsible and have a set amount of income, which those RAD rents would be, and then you'd have to conform to a set amount of operating expenses. They want the big push was they wanted all of the housing authorities to kind of get to that formula of RAD. So by keeping your Faircloth in public housing, I think it's a really smart move because you really don't know where this whole RAD thing's going to end up, in the end. I mean, it's a great push and everyone, I think we are complying a little bit with that and that's great, but it's nice to have a little, a foot in both pools there. I think it's a very smart decision actually to go the 60/40 route, keep your Faircloth. So,
oh yeah, go ahead, Ted, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that's pretty much it. So so we've, then the next thing we want to do is kind of like show you, okay, is there any questions on that? Because that actually is the financial part of it. Now we're going to go to schedule. But is everybody okay with the way we described that? Was that as clear as mud or is everybody okay? Okay, so the
Oh,
next.
Stephen, I think, are you trying to say something, Stephen? I didn't
Sorry?
hear you.
No, I mean, like,
Oh.
how's 60/40 sound? I mean, I kind of get it. It's complicated. That's an ugly chart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's-
appreciate
it's
you guys
ugly.
walking us through it.
Right, it's not for the faint of heart, it's ugly. We were, actually, we have to applaud Caitlin, because Caitlin actually did this WIDA conference where she described all this to an audience for an hour and 15 minutes. Cheryl and I were next to her, and people were still actually awake at the end of it. I couldn't believe it. She did a great job. It's like, it's really tough. But now the 60/40 and what we've talked about, I have to give you a kind of a precursor to what's coming up next. All of this engineering that we've done with Baker Tilly in terms of bringing in the scattered sites, putting historic on it, the 60/40, guess what? HUD's never seen that done before. Oh, great. So now we are the pioneers taking all the arrows on blazing a path through HUD on bringing this type of nice financing engineering to them. So they get it. It's not like it's beyond, it's not beyond what they understand, but all of those components have never been in front of them before in terms of a stack, a capital stack. So now we have to bring that through them. So now let's go through maybe the calendar.
Can I just
Caitlin, I don't
ask-
know if you wanted to bring that up. Were you going to bring up the
One
schedule?
more dumb question. Can I ask one
Oh,
more?
sorry, Steve.
No, so as I understand it, we're rolling, the intentions are rolling in scattered sites with the overall ask. You're chasing down historic tax credits,
Mhm.
state and federal, so
Correct.
20 and 20.
Yep.
And by that, we've got to put Mason Manor on the historic register, but
Yep.
do you get to utilize the cost associated with the scattered sites to hit up the tax credit, or is that only coming from the monies on Mason Manor?
Only the money's on Mason Manor. There will be no historic aspect on the scattered sites, correct?
So it's just a more complicated formula because you don't get the 40% on the added scattered sites. You only get it on the Mason
Correct.
Manor side.
And that's not really that complicated. The complicated thing about HUD was that we're bringing in a Section 8, we just removed them from public housing. And now we are taking them into this project and pardon all these acronyms. I won't use an acronym, as the low-income housing tax credit project, not a public housing project. Now we're doing this WIDA deal with the tax credits, and they're coming into that deal. So that's why this is kind of a
Okay.
path blazing venture to HUD. Okay.
And there will be, I mean, in all, like full disclosure, there will be some things that we cannot do as a result of the historic tax credits. But looking at the scope of work, it's not really affecting us a whole lot. I mean,
No.
our building is built pretty solid. We're not cutting new openings in places and moving things around. So I
Right.
think we're replacing all the windows, but we're keeping them in the opening sizes. And so
Sure.
luckily for us, like in some projects, I know that can add a lot of cost when you have to do the historic preservation portion, but at least for us, it
Yeah.
hasn't affected us too badly.
It's a great fit. It's a great fit for this. So now this is where Caitlin becomes the expert in terms of the processes with this path blazing trail here. So I'm going to let Caitlin kind of run through based on what we've decided, with the staff and you all here today on the 60/40 approach, what the schedule she thinks will be going forward to get HUD on board. Caitlin, you want to?
Sorry, I was muted. Everyone can see this? Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes, the RAD process is definitely complicated, definitely lengthy, and as Ted noted, by including the scattered site Section 8 contract in, we're kind of trailblazing with HUD. So there are some things that we've already accomplished. So this timeline is kind of split into two sections. This top section here are items that have been completed. This bottom section here are items that are in process that we need to work towards. I've also color coded it so that you can see items that are the RAD path, our repositioning path, are in blue. And then items are in green are based on our tax credit path and kind of getting all of our financing lined up. So where we're at right now is we've, started discussions with HUD. We told them what we want to do. They gave us a semi-approval in the form of a chat. They're like, yep, we know you want to reposition. So here you go. Here's what your RAD rents would be. So that's kind of where we're at. And our next major milestone with HUD is to have this concept call. And it's kind of what it sounds like. It's to have an initial call with an assigned HUD transaction manager where we will explain what we want to do. The transaction manager will probably ask us a number of questions, and then they will invite us to submit our financing plan, which is the next step. But to get to the concept call, there's a couple of pieces of things, and that's what you can see is in this reports needed column. So we have to have our capital needs assessment, which we have completed, which is great. We have to have our environmental completed, which we also have, awesome. And then we have to kind of complete a number of forms and documents that HUD requires. There's some questions in their online system. We'll need some information from Brown County because they're going to administer our Section 18 vouchers. So once we kind of have all that together, we can request this call. So we've been working on it. Once we started kind of reviewing other options, we paused. But now that we know we're going down the 60/40 path, we're ready to pick it back up again. And the goal would be to submit and request this by end of November, beginning of December. It'll take HUD maybe like a week or so to assign us a transaction manager and like schedule the call. While that's going on, Ted and Trent and their team are working on the tax credit application. So you can see up here, we've been working on it for a bit. Again, we paused, we're picking it back up, and I think we're ready to kind of submit that in the next couple, 2-3 weeks and get that into WIDA so that they can start reviewing it. Additionally, as WIDA is kind of reviewing the tax credit application, Ted and Trent are going to start kind of lining up our financial partners. So who's going to provide our debt, who's going to provide the equity, because we will need that in order to submit the financing plan, which again is our next HUD stage. Now I'm kind of jumping over the place, so feel free if you have questions as I'm going through. Definitely.
And Caitlin, you did a great job. I just wanted to clarify one thing in terms of debt and equity, just so you guys understand. So I don't know if you're all familiar with tax credit deals. You're probably not, but what happens on a tax credit deal is we are doing what's called a non-competitive tax credit application to WIDA. It's called a 4%, if you hear that. And we'll apply to WIDA. They say, okay, here's your tax credits. And then we take those tax credits. And the reason this timing is extremely important is we will have, like November 4th, we will have the entire application into WIDA. And we're going into this national conference, which is called AHF Live in Chicago. And we will have all of the sources and all of the uses and all of the accounting financing run done to show people at that conference and actually meet with them and court the best tax credit purchaser that we could possibly get, the best pricing and all that. What happens is WIDA gives us the tax credits. We have to go and we have to sell those tax credits to an investor who will purchase them. And that's our real partner. Like those are the guys, that's the entity that's going to be 99% owner of our project for the tax credit compliance period. And we got to like them and they got to like us. So there is definitely a courting period that'll happen. And the great thing about this project, it's right in a perfect time because I get 90% of my deals done for the next year at this conference. So we will have seriously formal, based on this timing here, we'll have formal meetings set up to discuss this project with the people that we think are the best tax credit investors. So that's why this is very important in terms of us complying with the schedule here.
Excellent. That's perfect. So as Ted noted, then kind of once we have those partners kind of lined up, we can submit our financing plan. There's a few other forms and documents that HUD also needs at this stage that Larissa and I will be working with Cheryl and Jamie on and the Housing Authority to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. But then once we submit everything to HUD, which is this goal of submitting by next March, it'll take them about 60 or so days to kind of review. I built a little bit of cushion right now into the timeline, so potentially this could be tightened up a little bit. But then they might ask some questions as they review the financial information. They might ask us for more information, but the end goal, once they review and approve everything, is to issue what's called an RCC, which is your RAD conversion commitment. And that is basically your ticket to closing. So it's HUD's stamp of approval. They're like, you're good to go. And then they give a list of like 30 legal documents that come on board. And they start furiously putting together these HUD documents, and simultaneously they'll be working with your selected financial partners to kind of work towards their financial closing, handling their due diligence, everything that they need. And then we'll have to turn all of those documents back. HUD hired attorney can review them and kind of sign off. And they give you 30 days or so to submit that package, and then HUD will take another 45 to 60 days to review. So that kind of puts us right now at a September 1st closing, when we'd actually close the transaction and say, okay, we can start doing rehab and start actually making some of the changes on site.
Yeah, and Cheryl, we initially said like June when we met, but Caitlin's like, yeah, all the WIDA processes.
Not like that too, just like
Yeah,
that.
all the WIDA processes and the investor, we will be done by spring, but then you got to have the HUD process putting into all those processes, and she thinks it's another 60 days or so for
And
that.
I will say too that there's, oh, sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
I was going to say, as much as I'd like to see us break ground today, right, and get this process started, if that allows us to create those vacancies from just people leaving
Right.
during that time frame, the more vacancies we can get in the pool, the less, I guess,
Relocation.
the less relocation, it'll be
Right.
easier on our tenants. So I
Yeah.
mean, that's a plus in that we're looking at next summer.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that way as well.
Right, and you just segued a perfect segue, Cheryl, in terms of the relocation discussion. So we did talk about like a June closing on this. The silver lining with the September, like Cheryl just articulated, was that we will have a little more time for the attrition of people just organically leaving Mason Manor, and that will minimize our relocation. And let me just give you a little more information on that. So we thought, hey, if we got one floor done or vacated, sorry, we could start, which is true. And we could start there. The problem is the way the MEP systems that we've discovered on this tower, which are not 100% like atypical of a tower of this nature, require several units to be really inconvenienced, we'll say. That would be if you're on the 8th floor and you're starting there, the 7th floor, we would have probably 7 tenants out of the 21 on the 7th floor. Yeah, it'd be moving out for weeks at a time because of the stuff we had to do in order to make this deal work. So we said, hey, it would be great if we had 2 floors completely done. And Cheryl just about had a heart attack. And then she said, hey, we're how can we do a floor and a half, which is really what we need. We need a floor and a half to make it work. And then we did the time frame of having 2 floors completely vacated versus 1 floor completely vacated, and the half floor we could kind of work around it, but it was like substantial. I mean, it was a 30-month deal, I think, with just 1 floor, and it's a 20-month deal with 2 floors vacated. And the reason that's very significant is now, and I did not know this until we actually got the historic completed, because I've actually never run into a project that actually went 24 months, but there is a 24-month limitation on the historic. You can't go over. You can only get historic credits on costs that are incurred in this 24-month period from start to end. So the 30-month thing doesn't work. So the floor and a half does work, but the 2 floors is even better. So that's where we're at. So the September does really likely to get people out of the building without having to move them. If we had to move anybody, what we would do, and we would come to you for approval and tell you the whole plan, but the macro 50,000 foot view we'd take those people, put them in an extended stay hotel. We pay for everything. We pay for food, we pay for whatever, and it's extensive. It's an expensive proposition. We actually make their life pretty nice off site at an extended stay hotel. And then, you know, of course, because of the attrition of the people leaving Mason Manor organically, that would dwindle as we went down floors. So that wouldn't be that long, actually. It would be a fairly short process, but would inconvenience those tenants and take them off property, which nobody wants. So silver lining in the September date is exactly what Cheryl said. I just wanted to give you a little more meat on the bone for that when we were
I
talking
think the
about.
goal is to keep the tenants in the building.
Right.
Like that's our goal, because that's just easier, even if it's a relocation from 8 down to 4 for a period of time, right? They can, you know, we'd rather keep the tenants in the building.
Yeah, and I didn't describe that. So what'll happen is, you know, of course, not everybody vacates the top floor and the 8th and the 7th in a really nice, orderly fashion. They vacate in all little holes in the building, right? So now what we would do is we would vacate 8, vacate 7, and move the people that are on 8 and 7 down to the lower floors into kind of temporary units. And then when those floors are done, we'd move them back. So that thing works, and we just work down the building. There's literally a science to it. It's more of a science than an art. But that part to you, but that we still need that amount of units though, you know, to make the whole project that would equal the 2 floors go efficiently as possible.
Yep.
So any questions on that? Sorry about that long dissertation. But we're definitely, you know, one of our biggest priorities is not to inconvenience the tenants as much as possible. So that's about it. You know, any questions on that? You know, we have a path. The nice thing about what we've done since we left, I think everything is very rooted in what we can achieve. We kind of have the pricing now in what I think is the highest point of this inflationary period. I don't think it's going to go up much. So we kind of have a worst case scenario on cost, which is a good thing. And interest rates, you know, it's kind of the wild card that'll eat a little bit into our proceeds. I think going with WIDA as your debt provider is a great idea. I really do. I think in terms of having, you know, WIDA be your debt provider, they can provide some subsidies on a subordinate debt side, that if the interest rate starts creeping up and doesn't allow us to get our budget, they can give us a little funding on that side. So I really think we're in a good place. I think this is very achievable in the time frame that we just articulated. All right, that's all we have, Cheryl.
Any questions for our consultants and developers?
Okay. Are you guys still awake?
Can you get us back on?
Oh,
There we
that's
go.
good. Yeah. That was intentional, because when you said I promised the cost going down, nobody heard that. So that was perfect.
Internet was lost. Back up.
And I
Okay,
just
got it.
appreciate the overview, Ted and Caitlin, you guys. It's been a while since we've discussed it, so just having to go through it all again really helped refresh memory, refresh the whole project in its whole. So thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And I honestly, the way we have financially kind of constructed this and engineered it, this is going to be one of those kind of nationally spotlighted public housing projects. And this is going to be really cool. And I think it's going to be it's gonna be great when it's done. I really think it's gonna be,
Always good to be on the front end of something new.
right, yep. Pioneer takes all the arrows, so you gotta make sure you got that bulletproof vest on, right? So,
Thanks so
Or
much.
arrow proof.
or arrow proof, right? I guess arrow proof is better. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further on this issue? Otherwise, we'll move to close the floor. All right, is there a motion to close the floor?
I'll make the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. Floor is closed. Thanks, Ted and folks, for this update. I'm sure we'll need more updates in the future,
Mhm.
but thank you very much.
Thank
right,
you.
moving-
Appreciate it. Take care.
All right,
Thanks,
very good.
everyone.
Moving on to item number 2, the GBHA bills. Stephanie,
Those would have been in your packet. There are 4 months of them. Are there any questions? Everything's pretty much normal, nothing out of the ordinary.
I didn't see anything that raised any issues to me other than the volume.
Yeah, right.
All right,
I didn't see anything.
all right. Any other questions from anybody? All right, then we'll move on to the GBHA financial report.
All right. That was also in your packet. So, we did just finish it. That was 10th and 11th. So that went well. We don't have, we're at the beginning of our year still, so everything's pretty quiet. But we'll see how it goes with all the changes that'll be happening.
Right. Any questions for Stephanie? No?
Nope.
All right. To the Langen report, which is also in your packet. Any questions on the Langen report?
All straight zeros, as we are not backfilling Mason Manor, as you know. So we have not had any applicants to review. And because our scattered sites have transitioned to Section 18, we are no longer doing the criminal background checks on scattered sites. So
Hmm.
that's why there's zeros.
Okay. All right, then moving on. Any questions on any other questions on Langen? Otherwise,
Go on,
go
Steve.
ahead.
Well, I was just curious as to we start vacating spots to make way for construction. Do we wind up stepping in something to take away funding elsewhere as our percentage of occupancy decreases?
So, I have been working closely with our HUD rep. So because our units are not considered vacant in the HUD world, they're considered remodeled dispo. It's not affecting it right now. So they're just classified as differently.
Okay, thank you.
And I
Any
just
other
had
questions?
questions about the criminal thing, Jamie. So,
Yep.
so does that mean you don't have to do a background check? And so you just rent and you just, like, what does that mean?
So for Mason Manor, we aren't doing criminal checks because we're not filling in any of our units. We're still doing like the annual background check.
Okay, okay.
When their lease is coming to be renewed. But for our scattered sites, we're no longer pulling off the waiting list. Brown County's with Integrated Community Solutions, they are pulling off the waiting list, so they have to do the criminal background check. So it's no longer a
Okay,
cost that we
okay.
incur. They pay for it and they're running the same report. Our
Gotcha.
policies mirror, so there's nothing different. We're still doing the landlord reference check for our applicants, but they're now past the buck for the criminal.
Gotcha. So criminal is still being run, just not by you guys. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on Langen?
Sorry.
No problem, no problem. All right, then we'll move on to director's report. Cheryl.
I just have a few things to report on, some projects that are moving forward. We're still working with MF Partners on the East Walnut project. They actually applied for WIDA tax credits. They did not get them. They missed them by a point. But then there must have been somebody that wasn't using them. So they actually got their tax credit from WIDA. So we're retooling that. I think that was about 43 affordable units on East Walnut. Been working with Habitat to do a project build. They're looking at 13 to 15 new single family homes in an area that would be new construction. We would have to put a street through. It's a hunk of vacant land that they purchased. They're looking, the proposal is at least 1 or 2 of those units being wheelchair accessible, 0 entry and right for those needs, which is good. Wise Women has come through with a project on Janus Avenue, which is on the west side. They're looking at family housing. That's been all through the planning approvals and whatnot. So I think they're still working on their financing. So that project is still moving forward. And then we've been working with NeighborWorks as well on smaller home developments because, you know, NeighborWorks just built a house on Irwin that is a smaller footprint, like 900 square feet, brand new house. I want to say like not much of a lot. They had like a bedroom, basement, and bathroom. So it's a smaller house for NeighborWorks. And I want to say they might have listed it like for $211 and it sold for $225. I mean, even the smaller houses, when you're building them, they're not affordable. So we're trying to explore some different ways to bring the cost down for that, like 150 to 200-ish price range is where we really need them. So we've been exploring smaller home builds and potentially some townhomes with them. And then one more thing, I had a conversation with the mayor and Habitat and NeighborWorks actually, and they're exploring community land trusts, which in other cities, housing authorities are actually kind of the leaders on community land trusts. Basically, you have vacant land within a city. It comes under the umbrella of a community land trust. And then you can build housing on this land. So as a person that needs affordable housing, I could buy that home, but I never buy the land. So I have the house, I can afford it. And then at some point down the line, you're able to build equity in that, right? But at some point when you sell it, you have to sell it to someone who can meet the income requirements. So a number of cities are doing that to try to ensure that we can keep that housing affordable. I liken it to tribal properties. So if you're a tribal member and you build, it's like the tribe never lets go of the property, but you can be a tribal member, right? That can live in that house and buy it. But then when you sell it, you have to sell it to a tribal member. So kind of the same concept, but we're kind of looking at that to see, I know there are models out there that exist right now. I don't know what role we would play in that at this point, but we've been approached as the housing authority to say, you know, what role could we play in that? You really need an entity that can manage that program. So as the city, my city hat, we have a lot of vacant units or vacant parcels throughout the city that could be included in this land trust now, but this entity would usually have a staff person to help with the builds, the financing, all this fun stuff. So new concept. Google it.
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
I just have a quick, we have lots of irons in the fire. I have just a quick question on the Habitat one. So are we able to, at options, look at the floor plans for the accessible units if we could, just to see if there could be any suggestions? The other thing is, so you're looking at some other building with NeighborWorks, townhouses, things like that. I've seen townhouses built with 2-end like duplex type single family on the ends that could be totally accessible. I would like to see them incorporate, NeighborWorks incorporating more accessibility. We know that from just the wait list for accessible apartments is huge everywhere. But to have those market value ones is even more important and is as important. And so like I had a person in an assisted living finally get out after 2.5 years into but all of that, our tax dollars are going into that payment at the assisted living, when that person could have been out on her own years earlier.
They haven't laid it out completely yet. at the meeting I was at, I shared with them, of course, your options and the ability to work
Good,
on the design, so they're aware of that. And I'll reinforce that as we move forward as well.
okay,
That's just a good place to go to help with how to design and what's kind of needed
right.
for that as well.
Amy.
Sandy, just to let you know, on our deal for Mason Manor, we will be doubling the accessible units, the amount
I
of.
know, I was gonna ask that, but I thought, I know we talked about it and I don't want to think like I didn't remember, but I didn't remember. So thank you for
Yeah,
that.
so we will be doubling the amount of accessible units that we have.
Good, good, good,
Well,
good.
and there are also going to be some changes. Like, for example, we just put the new kitchen in with the WIDA grant at Mason Manor, but it's not accessible.
Oh,
The developers.
but
are
that's a
talking about-
community room kitchen, correct?
It is a community room kitchen, but
Yeah.
I think part of the tax credit deal is we'll need to do some of that in the kitchen.
Oh,
So good, those are good. So those are good things coming from.
yeah, good, 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 good. And Jamie, I don't know I know you're increasing the accessible units, showers, just instead of tub shower units, walk-ins also are very nice to have, walk-in showers versus that tub shower, because walk-ins are much easier than a tub shower unit. So just they're doing those, but I don't know how far you are in the planning, but just a heads up on that. So it doesn't need to be barrier
Our
free. some people-
our four that we have right now are 100% roll-in showers. There are no
Right,
barriers.
Yep, yep.
So I
believe that.
believe that's in the design
Right,
for the additional units.
but I'm even talking for other units, just
Oh.
having, instead of a tub shower, just doing a walk-in, because that is something that falls happen the most in the bathroom as we're aging, and that's a majority of your population. So already getting rid of something that's a fall hazard, that step into the tub would be something that is thought of.
Yes, every single one of our units right now at Mason Manor are, so I believe they are lowering the amount that they would have to step into the shower. So it's
Good.
very free.
The threshold, yep.
Yeah, the
good.
threshold. Thank you. I was losing that word. But yeah,
That's
the
okay.
threshold is extremely low right now, and all of our units are
Wonderful,
walk-in showers.
good.
And then the
Cheryl,
last
just to-
thing, oh, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on, you talked about those smaller houses and smaller lots. One of the municipalities that I represent, there's a subdivision going in by a developer in the area, and they were putting in, they've done this in a couple of them before, but they're putting in smaller houses on those smaller lots. This thing isn't even fully constructed yet. The streets aren't even in, and all those small lots were gone. And they were designed to be starter houses for young couples or young people coming in. They're all being bought up by empty nesters before they're even constructed. You know, because they sell their big house, they have enough money to buy a high-priced small house, so it's almost a swap out type of thing, but
Yep.
they buy them up before they're even built.
So
Yep.
Bill, are they
Because they-
incorporating universal design in any of that? Do you know? Are they doing level entries? Are they doing?
I have no idea what they're doing. They're small houses, you know, 1 or 2 stall garages, small lot. But it's a person who's used to having a big house and full of kids. Now the kids are all gone. They get rid of the big house, but they still want a lot. They still want a garden, cut the grass, so they can do that stuff. They're buying up these smaller houses as fast as they can be built, even
Mhm.
before they're built. So this subdivision was going in, and all the small houses, the small lots are gone. And so they actually went back and replanned to put more smaller houses in and take away some of the bigger houses, because they can sell the small ones faster.
So then I hope that you will be our, a mouthpiece and say, make some of those units universally designed, accessible, so that, people can age there.
You're just
Don't put
writing
in
the
tub
contract,
shower
right?
units, put in walk-ins or barrier-free. I want you to be a great promoter of that, Bill. Come on.
All right.
Put that on as a rider in your
Yeah,
contract.
10% of the units
Yeah, your
or
subdivision
whatever.
covenants. Yeah. But I mean, that's just the interesting dynamics of all of this, that, you know, developers are trying to do one thing that's a good thing, which is to build starter houses, but it's filling another need that they sort of
Absolutely.
stumbled into.
That's cool.
Absolutely. I'm not surprised at that because that's what I hear from a lot of people is that, mom and dad need to find a small house and there's just
Right.
nothing out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's cool.
And then the last thing I just wanted to know, I'm not sure about a November meeting yet, but we will come to a point where we will need to work with our attorney, Paul Dombrowski, to talk about our development agreement with the developer. And we're going to have to lay out the terms of the project and get actually into a formal agreement. So that's going to be coming down the pike as well. I'm not sure if it'll be November or December, but
I have a question about that. So I assume that the city legal will review that for the housing authority. Does our separate entity need to hire a independent lawyer to review that thing?
so we hired an independent lawyer to review this because we actually have not quite sure how the entity plays into the housing authority.
Yeah,
So
well, I remember that as a organization in the entity, but the actual developer agreement too, right? Like in addition to that.
I guess the expertise lies in the RFP for the attorney that handles these. I don't believe our law department had that expertise, which was one of the reasons we went out and did the RFP for someone who's worked with RAD and the HUD and all of this repositioning.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around whether or not our separated thing needs to also keep that separated, but never mind.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure at this point. I think this attorney is looking at everything. He's
Okay.
advising us on the separate entity as well as what we're doing. So I would think that would fall into play in the same way.
It's probably inappropriate for this meeting anyway, so, all right, thank you, sorry.
No problem. That's all I have. Bill?
Anything, all right, anything more for Cheryl? Any questions on anything?
I have a million questions for community housing trusts, but told me to Google it, so.
Land trust.
Land trust, yeah, sorry.
Sounds interesting. All right, we'll move on then to item number 6, occupancy report.
So that's
Jamie.
in your packet. We are just letting our vacancies go, as you can see, so working on that for Mr. Ted at Gorman.
All right. Any questions? All right, hearing none, then looks like our last item before adjournment is next meeting would be, if we need to have one and have one in November, it would be
Yeah.
November 17th.
Okay.
All right. Anything further before we close up?
I missed you guys dearly.
Yeah.
Oh, just, I guess I want to just throw one thing out there for the board. We now have the ability to do hybrid meetings in room 604. So if this board ever wanted to come back in part, we could do a hybrid meeting where some people could be meeting here and then we would have the Zoom meeting at the same time for people to attend virtually.
I have
Okay.
two questions about that. What are all the other committees doing? And what is the Brown as far as in-person or virtual or hybrid?
Tell you that the mayor has recommended that we do minimally hybrid meetings. Council's back in the house, redevelopment authority is back in house, but plan commission is not. Landmarks is a mix. It really varies. It's up to the committee for the most part. So-
Water Commission is still virtual.
Yeah, so
Entirely.
it really, it depends on what the committee wants. Before we just had the upgrades made to 604. We couldn't do that before, have that hybrid meeting. Now we can actually, like staff would be in 604, for example, and if the public wanted to come in person, they could come to that meeting because it would be part of a Zoom meeting and it's, you could have it both ways. But it's kind of handy for us because Bill is, where are you, Bill?
Anacortes, Washington.
It's in Washington State. So,
I'm out on an island.
it's up to the board is what I'm saying, but I'm letting you know that there's a change made that if the board decided they wanted to get back in person, that option's still there.
I don't mind this at all, but are we less accessible to the public because we're exclusively virtual is my only concern. Like, is there a reason we need to, you know what I mean?
And Steve, that question came up at the Water Commission, which doesn't get a lot of public, people coming in from the public. but their discussion and review of this found it was more accessible. More people are likely to attend virtually than
Right.
in person because they can be sitting at their desk at work and plug into this, and then just, come online or take, unmute themselves when it gets to a point of interest, and then they can go back and, log off without having to get out of their desk chair. So,
Fair enough. Okay.
So just to be clear though, Bill, with a hybrid meeting, you can still do that.
oh, sure.
That,
Yeah.
I mean, before you couldn't, before it was like, Zoom or nothing. Now you have the ability to, let's say Terry's like, look, I hate this. I want to be in person. So maybe 2 GBHA members are in 604 and then the rest of you are on Zoom. That's a possibility now. So, but we can stay exactly the way we are.
Yeah,
Throw it up there.
one of the other municipalities I represent does have the ability to do this hybrid, and they will do the hybrid whenever there's a public hearing.
Oh,
So that people have the ability to come in person or by Zoom for public hearings. Otherwise, it's all virtual.
okay. It seems to work for the GBHA. Like you said, you don't have a lot of closed session.
Right.
Right, and we don't have a lot of public coming to the meetings, so. A different committee, it might be different, right?
So at least we know that's available. We can always
Yep.
consider that,
great.
on an agenda before, or like on today's meeting, we could consider doing a hybrid for a specific event at the next agenda item. So something to keep in mind. We can always
Yep.
bring it up and talk about it each meeting. All right,
Awesome.
all right. Is there a motion then to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
All right,
I'll second that.
and we got a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Very
Okay.
good.
You guys are amazing. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you all
Bye,
for your
all.
time today.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
safe, Bill.